7 o'clock, somewhere.
6:59. Whenever you're ready, sir. 7.
I'll call the meeting of the Annexation Committee to order. Tonight's meeting is in regard to the possible annexation of what is known as the Sunrise Motel. I'll go ahead and turn the proceedings over to our city manager.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. So tonight, before the Annexation Committee, we have one item, as was alluded to. We did receive a petition for annexation from Mr. Saipan Shah for annexing tax map and parcel 331, 3.00, parcel 180, that is better known as 22512 Sussex Highway, or as stated, the Sunrise Motel. You have in your board pack and in your packages the actual annexation petition, and a couple things I'll say there. The request is made for C2 highway commercial zoning, and the reason for annexation is city utilities. So this is the location of the Sunrise Motel on Sussex Highway. It's just south of the Sherman location, and there is actually a kind of I call it a paper street. There's a right-of-way or a road there between the two properties. Property has been there a long time. Most recently, the new owner has done some improvements to the property, and staff has visited it several times. Director of Electric, Director of Public Works, Director of Economic Development, and myself. He does have some continued improvement plans, and he is aware of the city utilities coming down Sussex Highway with the Unified Sewer District. So we've worked with him over the last 6 months or so to update him on the project, and he does desire to avail himself of those utilities. This is the city tax map, the Sussex County tax map. So you do have a copy of that in your package. It's washed out on the screen there. But it is approximately 1.64 acres with frontage on Sussex Highway that is there. This is the city zoning map as it stands currently, and the subject parcel is shown there, noted on the drawing. So a couple comments I'll make about that. The requested zoning of C2 is consistent with the zoning that is near the property. It's also eligible for annexation due to the fact that city limits are right across Sussex Highway, so they are what's termed contiguous to the existing city limits, so that makes it eligible for annexation. This is the comprehensive plan land use map, and again, it's a little washed out, but it shows the subject parcel there, and that the dotted ellipse that runs up Route 13 is commercial, so the zoning of C2 highway commercial is consistent with the zoning map and the comprehensive land use plan that is currently in effect. Go back just a little bit. Staff has done some preliminary work in advance of the Annexation Committee meeting, and we did do the plan of services, and we submitted that to the Office of State Planning. And there is a letter in your package signed by the state planner, Connie Holland. She's the director of the Office of State Planning. They have reviewed the plan of services and find it to be consistent. And the only thing they ask is, should the city approve and proceed with the annexation, to let Office of State Planning know. So there were no major issues found there or anything of that nature. Before we move on, are there any questions from the committee? Yes, sir.
Councilman Holland, what's the time zone he wants to have this done or hooked up to the water?
Okay.
How far along are we on that?
Okay, so I'll say a couple things about the time frame. We laid out for the property owner the charter's time frame on annexation because we wanted him to know how long this would take. So we started on the 14th of last month, and today is the Annexation Committee meeting. The fastest staff thinks we could process this would be the annexation would be complete mid-October. So that's a time frame for you to become annexed. Once he annexes, he would then be eligible to receive city services. We have already installed and are in the final phases of testing of the water main that runs up Route 13. So theoretically, once he's annexed in October, he could apply to extend the water service to his business and tie on to the water. The sewer is a little bit, he's dependent upon some other sewer extensions that are going to occur. You probably remember we were participating in a sewer extension with the new car dealership that is coming to Seaford. That brings it closer to his property, and we don't really know the time frame yet. He's going to move it as quickly as he can, but he really is wise to wait for that so that he doesn't have to pay for that extension. So while water he could connect to maybe by the end of the year or first quarter of next year, sewers might be a little while longer. Any other questions?
I do have a question, just for the record, that its current use, the current use of this property is consistent with the C2 zoning.
Yes, that's a good point. The C2 zoning and C1 zoning, which is referenced, does permit motels and hotels.
Are there any other questions before we move on?
Okay.
Please.
Yes, sir. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is to discuss the draft annexation committee report. So the committee has a draft report that staff tried to prepare, and I'll just hit the highlights of the items that are covered there. And it's a standard format that we use. It describes the petitioner and the location of the lands, which we've already gone through, 22512 Sussex Highway, Sepan Shah, and gives the tax map and parcel number. We talked about the reason for annexation, that he would like city utilities. We discussed streets and roadways. I'll just point out that this states that Sussex Highway is a state-maintained road. The city does not have any city-maintained streets, nor, because it's a small parcel, do we expect to build any city streets there. Stormwater drainage, there is not a municipal stormwater system near the property, so anything that would be done here, the first contact likely would be DelDOT to tie onto their stormwater system. And obviously, they would need to go through the Sussex Conservation District, as any project would. We talked about zoning. It is consistent with the city's land use map, the city's zoning map, and it is requested to go to C2 Highway Commercial. I'll just point out there that the current zoning that Sussex County has on it is general business. Electric, the parcel currently receives service from Delmarva Power. So should we annex this property, the city has the right to amend our service territory and buy out this service, which council's aware of, the committee's aware of. We've done, in the recent past, I think 3 or 4 times. In much longer past, we've bought out several services. So that's the city's right, should council decide to do that or not. But we would amend our service territory with that. We would also look to serve the property with electric. Now, we did run a pole line up Sussex Highway on the other side, the northbound lane. So we'd have to have a plan to run any kind of service up the southbound lane. Sewer, we currently have a gravity sewer main near the subject property. It serves the Lowe's development just south of the property. So that would need to be designed and extended there, but it is a long distance. So we talk about, should they need lift stations, they need to get an engineer involved to do survey work to make sure they can tie on their business there. So we talk about that, and we lay out what the city's practice is for assisting developers should they want to extend. We would do a cost share if it's beneficial to the city's regional service plan. There is an existing water main near the property as well, a 16-inch water main located on the other side of Sussex Highway. So should he decide to annex and be successful, he could avail himself of that water line. We talk about easements and any easements that would be necessary for us to get to the property or provide service to the property with electric, water, or sewer, or stormwater. We would ask them to supply to us. Property taxes, we talk about that. Should they annex, they will be subject to our taxation, and we would send that to our tax assessor for an assessment. I'll add that now that the city has a lodging tax, this property would also be subject to that lodging tax upon annexation. We talked about the comprehensive plan. It is in accordance with the current comprehensive plan for commercial development along Route 13. So that does meet the requirements. There's just some advantages and disadvantages here. I'll just talk about some highlights. Obviously, the advantage to the city are we would benefit from an increased tax base, not only from real estate tax, but lodging tax in this case. We would have the opportunity to provide utility services, water, sewer, and electric. And then we would, you know, as the city grows, we spread our costs over a larger base. We would have some local control over the development, so something, you know, right outside our city limits, we never had any code control or anything of that nature. Should they annex, that would change. It would be served by the municipal police force, which would reduce the property owner confusion. We actually did send this over to the chief of police, and we do have a letter in the file where they are in support of this annexation. So they looked at the property's history as far as crime calls, things of that nature. The governing body that will be most impacted by the land use decision will be making those decisions. So the city council, because they're right there, they would be making those decisions. And it would keep with livable Delaware and minimize sprawl. So we'd be redeveloping or annexing an existing property. There are some disadvantages to the city. With continued growth, we'll have to expand our personnel to provide the services. The expansion may increase operational and capital budgets. It will increase area for the city departments to serve. Traffic may increase if this property redevelops. Accidents could increase out on the highway if they're not improved. There will also be an added number of requests for services for the city to review the plans, do service extension, police services, things of that nature. Advantages to the area proposed for annexation. They'll receive all utility services from one owner, so coordination of services will be less complicated. That's applicable if we buy all the services or provide water and sewer services. They'll be provided local police protection, and that hopefully will be an anticipated shorter response time coming from Seaford versus the state police. They'll come here for permitting, so it'll be coordinated through the city. He won't have to go to Georgetown, and we'll assist them. We will provide, our team here provides assistance with obtaining other agency permits, so Del Dot, Conservation District. We provide checklists for review and development, and the local government will be doing the zoning of the land, so we'll have some local control. Snow removal of city on all city-owned public streets, leaf and limb pickup at the curb, and maintenance, paving maintenance, things like that on city streets. Complaints will be made to the city, and the property owners will receive local representation for concerns through the elected officials. So they can discuss with council any concerns they have and receive that representation. And obviously the water and sewer services will be extended by the, once extended by the owner, will improve the property's value. Disadvantages to the area should annexation occur. They'll have to adhere to these local codes, building maintenance facilities, and sometimes people perceive that as a little more restrictive than they otherwise had before. They'll have only one vendor for utilities, water and sewer service, so they'll have to work with us because we're the utility owner. And they'll have to adhere to more restrictive codes, and you know, we don't really permit as much outside storage, property appearance, parking of vehicles. We wrote the recommendation to suggest the committee members unanimously agree to proceed with the proposed annexation for the property and recommend the property to be zoned C2 highway commercial. Obviously, there will need to be a public hearing. It's required in our charter as part of the annexation process. And we do include a disclaimer that when the annexation committee meets, they just look at annexation of land. Is it in accordance with our comprehensive plan? Is it the way the city wants to grow? Not necessarily what project that may get built there or how much traffic may get created. It's really truly related to annexation. And certainly, if there are any questions on the draft, we can certainly try to answer them, or if there are any suggested modifications, you know, staff would be more than happy to discuss those or make those changes.
Councilman McCoy.
Councilman McCoy, two questions here. One in regards to number 2 underneath the disadvantages to the city. It states expansion may increase operating and capital budgets. In previous annexation throughout the city, do we have any kind of ballpark idea what those operating and capital budgets might increase?
No, but here's what I'll say. It depends on what you're talking about. Like, as an example, a gravity main is a little bit less costly to maintain than a lift station or a water pump. So some of the things we maintain are more cost intense. This, and we'll see what he finally winds up with. If it is a gravity main and just a water service, I mean, we have thousands of those, so we obviously would, if there's a leak, we'd have to respond to it. You know, obviously, we're delivering the water service, but the more water we have to pump, the more water we have to treat, those costs go up for that addition.
And the other question I have is, in previous annexations, I guess, opportunities, have we seen a snowball effect, and I say that to state, surrounding areas may notice that they're getting annexed. Maybe they decide to also entertain the idea of being annexed. Do we have any reason to believe other areas might be interested?
Well, I'll try to answer it this way. We have had annexations, and a great example is on the other side of Sussex Highway. Back in, I think it was the early 2000s, there was an annexation of, I think, 7 or 8 parcels. So it took us from basically Walmart all the way to the Dolby Farm, Road 46. And that's the largest bulk annexation that I remember since then. But sometimes you will have people that will go together, property owners, and see the value of extending utilities to their property. Certainly, the more property owners that come on and the more we get our utilities out there, providing utility service really maximizes the development of the land. A lot of people, this is a great example, and I'll share with you that when you look at the property, and we'll go back, he currently has see that little area of land that's just grass, kind of in that back corner? Right now, that's where his drain field is. So he desires to make an addition to the building, but he can't build on top of his drain field. So what he would like to do, because he has the opportunity of connecting to utilities at some point in the future, he would like to abandon the on-site septic, and that would free up land for him to better develop that property. So those are the kind of redevelopment things that you'll see as we start to develop through the area. Or sometimes you'll see properties that redevelop and get completely demolished and a new building built because they can then maximize their investment. So those are the kind of key things that we see. Doesn't always happen, but I hope that answers your question.
10-4.
Any other questions? I have a question, just a procedural question. Should, and this would go with anyone who annexes, I guess, not just this particular parcel. When it goes through and the property is actually annexed, and then you have an assessment, what's the timing? Is there a look back to the time of assessment once you do or to the time of annexation once the assessment takes place?
Well, I'm
Or
fortunate.
is it afterwards?
Okay, I'm fortunate to have the city tax assessor here with us, but I think I'm going to state this right. You know, once it's annexed, then we send it to our tax assessor to perform the assessment. And then, depending upon the timing, we do a supplemental tax assessment where it is in that tax year. So they could get a partial year bill based on timing. And then the next annual assessment, obviously, they'll get the full assessment.
Well, I understand it's prorated, but
We don't do lookbacks.
you don't, so, no, I'm not talking about, I would be talking about a look back because there's going to be a lag in time between the assessment and the annexation, or the other way around. Because you're not going to assess the property prior to annexation.
Right. We
You
do.
want to make sure
Do we
that
do
this is
2
going to go
supplementals
through.
a year or 1?
We do 3.
3. So I think what I'm going to say, and Tracy will say this much more eloquently, but we would catch it on that supplemental assessment, and so we would get it for that piece. Those 3 occur, you know, basically quarterly is what happens, I guess.
Right, we do it every 3 months, quarterly.
So
Okay.
So
depending
wherever
upon
it fell,
timing.
we would send the tax assessor out to do the field work, to look at the property, to get assessment, and then we would bring that data back in and do either 50%, 75%, or 25% where it fell.
Could you get to the mic, please, and repeat that?
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, so what we would do is, once it went through the annexation process and was approved and annexed into the city, we would then send this information, the tax map and parcel and the address, to our tax assessor. We include that in our supplemental listings that we do quarterly. And based on when it was approved and annexed, it would be billed with that supplemental listings of everyone else that gets a supplemental bill due to COs being issued. And so it would get either 50% of that tax year, 75%, or 25%, depending where in the tax year it fell.
I see.
That makes sense.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Do you have anything else to add?
No, sir, I do not.
If there are no more questions, then I'll receive a motion for a recommendation.
Councilman McCoy, I'll make the motion to approve the annexation committee report for the property owned by Mr. Sapan Shah, tax map parcel 331-3.00180.00 at 22512 Sussex Highway, known as Sunrise Motel, to the city council.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
Councilman Holland, I second that motion.
Are there any questions on the motions? If not, I'll hear the yeas and nays if you would call it out. Tracy?
Vice Mayor Henderson,
Aye.
Councilman Holland,
Aye.
Councilman McCoy.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you very much. It appears we have no old business before this body, so I'll accept the motion to close the meeting.
Vice Mayor, so moved.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Councilman Holland, I second that motion.
If there's no questions on the motion, I'll hear the yeas and nays. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much for your participation at tonight's meeting, and thank you folks for all your support. That concludes the meeting.
Thank you.